Just remember, audience, why would you want to have a relationship like the Joker and Harley Quinn when you could have a relationship like Wade and Vanessa? I'm sorry, I rewatched Deadpool earlier, and I realized that I had this Deadpool shirt still, and yeah. We're talking about From Justin to Kelly.
This summer,
come with us to Miami. It's not my scene.
Music will bring two strangers together.
Hey, they go from the beach.
And nothing can come between them.
I'm gonna ask her out again.
Except all their friends.
So what does a girl need to do to get you?
There are a million hot girls here, and you're still talking about the one girl who blew you off.
Kelly Clarkson.
I should take a chance.
Justin Guarini.
Next girl is special.
In the musical event of the summer. From Justin to Kelly.
The reason that this movie exists is because the finale of American Idol's first season ended with Kelly Clarkson and the runner-up being Justin what's-his-nuts, I don't know his name. And then the geniuses over at Fox were like, hey, since the first season's finale was such a big hit, it's all over the news, why don't we try and make a movie that has those two as the leads of a romantic musical? That's gonna be a great idea, right? God, 20th Century Fox, you suck at making movies, and this is a prime example of it. No wonder Disney bought you out. That way you guys can just keep churning out all your most memorable stuff like Star Wars and keep making them a profit. A waitress from Texas and a college student from Pennsylvania meet during spring break in Florida and come together through their shared love of singing. This movie currently sits at number 15 on IMDb's Top 100 Worst Movies list. And it also won a Razzie for Worst Musical of our first 25 years. Here's your basic setup. It's spring break, and we follow two different groups of people. 3 guys, 3 girls. It's basically every late 80s, early 90s sitcom ever. The normal guy and the normal girl, and they're kind of the leader of the trios. That's obviously Justin and Kelly. As for the other 2 guys, you got womanizing jock type guy, and then you got the nerd, who is a nerd, who runs around with his glasses, constantly taped up in the middle, and his button-down shirts with his pens in the pocket protector. Good to see that even back then, things from the 80s were still making a comeback. As for the other 2 girls, you have the girl who's blonde, rich, and constantly hooking up with guys left and right. And then the other girl is probably one of the more interesting characters, and we'll get into that. And I didn't know this at the time until I looked it up. She's played by the girl that would go on to voice Tiana in Princess and the Frog. You have no idea how happy I am that she went on to be in better things than this shit. Kelly comes from small little podunk town where she's constantly getting hit on at her restaurant karaoke bar job by this guy in a cowboy hat who's constantly talking about, you know, come on, we'll go out and we'll grab a beer, darling, that kind of thing. And, you know, she's the strong, independent type. She don't need no man, which changes halfway through the movie because then when she starts thinking that Justin is, like, ignoring her and blowing her off, then all of a sudden she's like, trying to find any other guy that could like be a suitable replacement for him. It's bad enough that the character basically had no character to begin with, but you don't change a character's dynamic like that for no reason halfway through a movie. So her friends ask her to join them on spring break, and she's the kind of friend that doesn't like spring break, and she says, oh, spring break, that objectifies women with, you know, their bikini contests and all that kind of thing. Ironic that she says that because every time they're on the beach, it is like the easiest opportunity for them to put her in a bikini. So I find it really funny they tried going with that. Meanwhile, Justin and his crew are the ones that are trying to hold all these different party events, like a whipped cream bikini contest, and lo and behold, the 2 star-crossed lovers eventually find each other, and from there, it is a musical filled with really bad early 2000s covers or really terrible dance pop songs, and filled to the brim with lack of character development and absolutely terrible dialogue. First time that Justin and Kelly are on screen together is during a big dance number that they have. And they share like a little duet together, and then later on, Justin is running away from a bunch of girls who want his coupons that he's handing out. And he runs into a bathroom to hide, and then he comes across Kelly. They have a little back and forth, and oh, they decide they're gonna get together later and, you know, get to know each other better. But it's weird because they act like they'd never seen each other before, but they shared like a minor duet during one of the big opening songs of the movie. So that was just weird. Basically, the relationship is constantly on again, off again kind of thing, where in one scene, they like each other, and then the next scene, she doesn't like that he's hosting all these, like, whipped cream bikini contests, and oh, she thinks it's so objectifying. And then later, they have a big, sweet song together, and then the movie, like, near the 3rd act, then decides they're gonna try and throw a monkey wrench into everything, and try to actually have some kind of form of plot and conflict in the film. Before we cover that, let's talk about some of the very brief subplots that we got going on here. So as for the womanizing frat type guy, Basically, there's just a bunch of like dumb comedy going on with him where he keeps running into this female cop and she keeps writing him up tickets. And after a while, I'm just like, she keeps writing him up tickets. Why doesn't she just arrest him? As for the nerd, he met a girl online and he's constantly trying to meet up with her. And the big joke of it is his friends make fun of him because, oh, only nerds use the internet. This was such a stigma that people had against the internet back in the 90s and early 2000s. Everyone was like, oh yeah, only nerds sit at keyboards and only nerds are on the internet. Nowadays, everyone's on the internet. One of my favorite examples of that was whenever I watched Sailor Moon as a kid, the character Melvin, they always made fun of him for being a nerd who used the internet. God, if only those people could look into the future and see how far the internet has come. The most interesting subplot in the whole film is what Tiana is doing. She falls in love with this busboy who has kind of a complicated life and like he's a very struggling type of guy. And their whole subplot was one of the more interesting parts of the movie because if you made that the main focus instead, that actually probably would have been a more compelling film. She really likes him despite the fact that he's just a busboy, and then it turns out that he's connected to some bad people that he's trying to get away from, and he's worried that she's not going to like him. They have a bit of a falling out, but then eventually they get together. They were a lot more interesting than the main love story in the title of the film. I swear to God, Justin and Kelly have zero chemistry in this entire movie. There's one scene where they're on a boat, and they're like going out in the middle of the ocean, and when they're singing their big song about how they love each other, they're not even remotely looking at each other for most of it. You know what? I can't even fault them because they're not actors. Like, at that time, they were only known for one person won a contest on American Idol and the other was the runner-up. They're not actors. I could easily imagine these guys probably didn't even want to do this, but Fox was like, hey, you signed contracts. That means we partially own your soul. Now, when I said earlier they start to have a conflict near the third act of the movie, I wasn't lying about that, because then they established that the blonde rich girl in the Kelly's friend group, they established that she's jealous of Kelly and she wants Justin for herself. That was their really horrible attempt at motivation for this character. She even sings a really terrible villain song at one point. But then she starts doing a bunch of really psychotic things to try and like get them away from one another. The two that are coming to mind right now is she gives Justin her number, saying that it's Kelly's number, and then she starts hanging out with him, and there's a whole third act misunderstanding where Kelly sees Justin with her and she tries to force a kiss onto him and Kelly's like, oh no, and then they have a big fight on the busy street corner that night, and then eventually later it's all revealed, and I guess all is forgiven because the movie doesn't treat that blonde rich girl as a villain. It all makes sense now. It's one of those animes where they try to force a redemption arc for a villain when they don't need a redemption arc. In the middle of the movie, she calls that cowboy guy that was hitting on Kelly at the beginning of the movie to show up, and he challenges Justin to like hovercraft tournament. Like, these guys are on like watercrafts and they're in the ocean and they have to throw a certain amount of balls into baskets that are in the back of the hovercraft, something like that. I guess they thought it was going to be exciting, but the way it's filmed just made it incredibly boring. Yes, after trying to break them up, eventually she apologizes, which I guess makes everything okie dokie. And then Justin and Kelly have a big romantic song number together, which is just this lame pop power ballad romance song, which is terrible like the rest of the soundtrack. And then, because damn it, this is a Fox movie, and it cannot be a Fox movie without some kind of forced dance number at the end. You know, if you've been following my Blockbuster reviews, you've seen we've done that before with stuff like Gulliver's Travels and Marmaduke, both of which are movies that Fox did. And this is another example with everyone dancing to a terrible cover of That's the Way I Like It by Casey and the Sunshine Band. Casey and the Sunshine Band's, no joke, is one of my favorite bands of all time. So fuck you, movie, for ruining that song. Before this terrible dance number ends the movie out, we have to make sure that all the subplots are wrapped up, and they are. I mean, Justin is now with Kelly, Tiana is now with Carlos, the busboy, the nerd is now with the e-girl, the frat guy ends up hooking up with the hot cop lady, and the blonde rich girl, she just goes back to trying to bang every single thing that has a penis. I remember hearing about how bad this movie was. I remember seeing that this movie was on the IMDb worst movies list, and I was like, man, this looks really generic and bad, but I don't know if it's going to be irritatingly bad. And I'm not going to lie, I was a little annoyed by watching this. Everything about this movie just screams nobody wanted to be part of it, you know? Like, musicals are the kind of movie genre that are built around having big, grand, spectacle, song numbers. But everything in this movie, I mean, the choreography is fine, but like, it's just really flat looking most of the time. It looks like everyone is dancing on a TV show set half the time. None of the characters are interesting, and the one subplot that was even remotely interesting is not given that much screen time, which is unfortunate. The soundtrack, while it's probably not my thing, I cannot stand the songs. The plot itself feels even below your average rom-com, and it straight up feels like something out of like an ABC family sitcom or something like that. And the dialogue is surprisingly bad. You would swear this was written by like space aliens who are trying to replicate a rom-com like musical type movie and failing. This movie only exists because Fox wanted to capitalize on that and nothing else. I could guarantee you that everyone else that was involved with this movie probably didn't want to be part of it, and I don't blame them. So yeah, if we could take away anything from this, it's screw 20th Century Fox for making this movie. Anyways guys, I have one movie left for February to talk about, and I've actually never seen a trailer for it yet. I don't think I've even seen the poster for it. It's called After Last Season, but a lot of people have said it's apparently really bad. Some people have hailed it as like one of the so bad it's good movies like The Room, and other people have said no, it's one of the worst abominations ever made by humanity. So we'll see how I personally rank it when I get around to seeing it. But until then guys, I'm Adam Sykes of the Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.
He really wanted to do the movie and I didn't, so that's why when you see my face on camera go, like there's this whole look of like, okay, I gotta do this damn movie.